In 3 seconds, 4 men would learn that ambushing a CEO in front of her janitor was the last mistake they'd ever make. Shanon Reyes's heels clicked against the concrete floor of Helixion Corporation's parking structure, echoing through steel pillars and the low hum of ventilation. It was nearly midnight, another 16-hour day defending the world's most advanced cybersecurity architecture from being stolen by those who built it. Her silver sedan waited near the service elevator, sleek and silent. Keys trembled in her hand. Tomorrow's congressional hearing would decide whether Helixion's encryption system, Project Citadel, would protect nations from cyber attacks or be dismantled by lobbyists posing as patriots. She exhaled, shoulders sagging under years of responsibility disguised as ambition. Then movement. 4 figures stepped from the shadows. Too coordinated to be security, too quiet to be maintenance. Faces hidden behind matte masks, hands dipping into black jackets. Shanon froze. Her keys slipped, clattering against cement. The sound was small but final, like a gavel hitting wood. From around the corner came the faint squeak of wheels. A janitor's cart emerged, pushed by Everett Daryl, the night maintenance man most executives never noticed. He'd just finished sanitizing the data center on the 32nd floor, rows of humming servers that never slept, unlike him. Everett's eyes took in the scene in one glance. 4 men, tactical formation, their target cornered beside her car. Predators, his fingers wrapped around an aluminum mop handle, worn smooth from years of repetition. To anyone else, it was a cleaning tool. To him, it was geometry, leverage, and control, a weapon hidden in plain sight. The late assailant gestured to his team. Time to move. Everett stepped between them and Shanon with a calm born from darker places. He didn't blink, didn't breathe louder than necessary. And when the first man lunged, Everett's response was surgical. One arc of the mop handle and a wrist cracked like dry kindling. The weapon clattered across the floor. "Run," Everett said, never turning his head. His tone wasn't raised. It was command, quiet, and absolute. But Shanon Reyes hadn't built the most secure network on Earth by running from threats. She dove into her car, headlights blazing alive, flooding the garage with searing white light. The attackers flinched. Everett moved. The cleaning cart slammed forward. Industrial wheels crushing toes and ribs. Metal collided with bone. These weren't amateurs. Their recovery speed, formation, discipline, ex-military. But they'd never fought a man who'd patched arterial wounds under mortar fire, who'd once been known in whispered circles as the Surgeon of Narang. One attacker swung a blade. Everett pivoted close, too close, and ended the fight with 2 precise strikes that left the man breathless on cold concrete. 30 seconds, 4 down. The smell of sweat, metal, and ozone hung thick. Everett's sleeve was torn, blood tracing a clean line across his forearm. He didn't seem to notice. Shanon stepped from her car, shaking, phone in hand. "You're hurt," she whispered. "It's nothing." He was already calculating. Distance to his apartment, time before his daughter's medication alarm. 23 minutes to get home. He muttered softly, almost to himself. Darlene's midnight dose couldn't be late. He pushed his cart toward the service elevator, stepping through its closing doors as if violence had never touched him. Shanon stood alone among fallen bodies, calling security with trembling hands. But one thought pulsed louder than the sirens beginning to wail in the distance. Janitors don't move like that. Apartment 4B smelled like microwave noodles and the faint sterility of alcohol wipes. Everett slid the deadbolt with a soft click, the kind of sound a man memorizes when silence is survival. The living room nightlight painted the wall in a small amber square. On the couch, Mrs. Adele from next door dozed with a pillow hugged to her chest, a cardigan draped like a shawl. Down the hallway, a child's breathing came steady, even, perfect. He paused in the doorway of Darlene's room. 9 years old, hair a little wild against the pillow, the stubborn crease still tucked between her brows even in sleep. A cardboard puzzle of a server rack lay half-assembled on the rug, tiny paper blades labeled in her careful handwriting. A glow-in-the-dark constellation kit threw shy stars across the ceiling. On the nightstand, the injector, the med log, the pen that lived there and nowhere else. He checked the time, right on schedule. He wrote a neat 12 o'clock a.m. in the log, the way he always did because routines make storms smaller. He cleaned the thin cut on his forearm at the kitchen sink, not because it demanded attention, but because old training never truly leaves. Shallow edge. No stitch necessary. No story he cared to repeat. From the couch, Mrs. Adele stirred. "You're late, dear." He smiled without turning, kept his voice low so the night wouldn't shift. "There was a spill on 32. Took longer than I thought." She accepted it with the simple faith of good neighbors who don't ask questions past what they can carry. He walked her to the door, thanked her, slid the second deadbolt after she left. Darlene's door creaked when he opened it again. He winced at the sound and laughed at himself for wincing. The injector hissed softly, a familiar kindness. Her eyelids fluttered, then settled. He brushed a curl from her temple and watched the pulse point there, a habit he would never break. On the kitchen table, a field trip form waited under a magnet shaped like a dinosaur. Tomorrow, the Science Museum. Her orange crayon circle around parent chaperone made his chest tighten with a feeling that was not fear, only fierce. He signed the line with the name that belonged to this life. Everett Daryl. His phone buzzed on the counter. Helixion security alert. Incident under review. All-night staff to report. He silenced it. Then another vibration, the quiet ping of a calendar reminder he never let himself ignore. Morning dose set for 6:30. He checked the backup alarm. He checked the backup to the backup. The old-timer's superstition that isn't superstition when a child depends on it. For a long minute he stood by the window and watched the city's slow river of headlights. Helixion's tower caught the last smear of rain and held it like mercury. Somewhere in that building, someone had flipped a switch they shouldn't have touched, and the cameras blinked lies. He pictured the little tell he'd seen in the sub-basement weeks ago, a test pattern where a live feed should be, like a wink from a face pretending not to know him. Inside, knowledge used at the edges. Not brute force, insertion, replacement. He filed the thought in the mental locker where he kept the things that could not be allowed to bloom at the wrong time. When exhaustion finally won the argument, he lay on the couch with one forearm over his eyes and tried to make his breath a metronome. The garage, the 4 men, the precise spacing that said trained, not opportunistic, a wrist breaking clean under aluminum, headlights turning shadows into outlines, Shanon Reyes not running, her hands trembling after and her voice steady during. He built a map from those pieces because maps lower your pulse, and sleep approves of maps. In the blue hour before dawn, he woke with the same thought he'd fallen asleep to: keep the routine. He plated toast into triangles because she liked triangles, poured milk into the cup with the tiny chip she called Lucky, and set the jelly where her hand would reach without looking. Small victories orient big days. Darlene shuffled out with slippers whispering against laminate, hair even wilder now, eyes half closed. He kept breakfast easy, conversation simpler. Want to see something cool after school? She nodded mid-yawn, and it counted as a yes. He tucked a note into her backpack, 2 lines and a doodle, because he did that on days when the city felt loud. He walked her to the bus. He did not look over his shoulder more than twice. That was the rule. Back upstairs, he laid out his uniform with the same care surgeons show instruments. Helixion badge, keyring, work order tablet with the pretense of a cracked corner. He sat for a moment before he left, hands flat on his knees, spine pressed into worn foam, and let a single minute go by with no thought in it at all. Across town, glass woke to daylight. Helixion's executive floor wore the morning like armor. Steel, white, reflected sky. Shanon Reyes stood at the window and let her coffee go cold, thinking about keys hitting concrete and a man who moved like the quiet between lightning and thunder. The city didn't know anything had shifted yet, but she did. Helixion had spent 5 years telling governments and banks that Citadel would make their nightmares someone else's problem. Now, an older nightmare had walked out of a stairwell with a mop and made a promise she could hear even though he hadn't said it aloud. She opened the incident dashboard. Access logs, door events, camera statuses. A pattern flickered if you stood back far enough. The kind of interference that never quite trips alarms because it is the alarm. Rerouted. Someone with keys to the wiring closet. Someone who understood how to blind a place by telling it could still see. Her phone lit with the board chair's name. She let it ring until it stopped and considered how much easier cowardice becomes when it's written in the language of fiduciary duty. Then a security ping. Night maintenance requests an interview about the incident. He says he has information. She stared at the text and saw headlights again. Conference room B in 1 hour, she typed, and sent it before she could decide to be cautious. At 9:30, the floor hummed with the AC's clean breath and the quiet clatter of keyboards. She placed her palms on the cool edge of the table to ground the tremor she refused to name. The door opened. A uniform crossed the threshold. No limp, no swagger, nothing to declare itself except the way he fit the room without needing to measure it first. Janitors don't move like that, she thought again. Not as accusation now, but as an invitation to truth. He sat. He did not waste her time. What he put on the table wasn't dramatic. No thumb drive, no smoking schematic, only a sequence of observations arranged like stepping stones across a fast river. Test patterns where there should be feeds, edge switches that blink the wrong rhythm when no one is watching, badge pings that don't belong to anybody, and the precise timing of a garage camera's last honest frame. The simple certainty in his voice did more work than moods and suspicions ever could. He didn't pitch a theory. He outlined a flaw. She could fill in the motive on her own. She thanked him and didn't call it thanks. He nodded and didn't call it anything. He stood to go, then paused, eyes on a hairline crack in the conference table that no one else ever noticed. "Be careful who you trust," the silence said. He left. When the door clicked shut, she looked at the city again and saw it not as skyline, but as an array of attack surfaces. She thought of 4 men in a circle and 1 man stepping into it. And somewhere inside that same hour, in a smaller apartment where morning had already earned its keep, a girl in sneakers ran down a hallway to art class with a folded note in her pocket, and no idea the day had balanced itself on a mop handle, and the steady hands of someone who remembered too much to ever be ordinary again. The city exhaled. The day got on with pretending to be a day. But beneath Helixion's polished floors, current learned a new route, and the cameras blinked like eyes that had decided to stay open. The 32nd floor of Helixion Corporation never really slept. Servers hummed like a living organism, cool, constant, and perfectly indifferent. Shanon Reyes stood before floor-to-ceiling glass, the skyline reflecting against her eyes like data streams. The morning light made her office appear calm, but she could feel the tremor beneath the surface. Something in the system was rotting, and last night's ambush had been the first visible symptom. She reviewed the logs from the security division, access attempts, badge pings, and internal transfer requests. On paper, it all looked routine. In reality, it read like a confession written in code. Someone had reached into Helixion's encrypted network, Project Citadel itself, and duplicated entire access trees before the hearing. The timestamps aligned with the attack in the parking garage. Whoever orchestrated this wanted her silenced, not simply discredited. A soft knock at her office door broke her focus. Her assistant stepped in, face pale. "The board moved the federal briefing to 4 p.m., ma'am, and there's been another internal breach. Someone accessed the Citadel root key database." Shannon's voice stayed level. "From where?" "Inside the building," her assistant whispered. The words were worse than any headline. Inside, it meant someone sitting in her office meetings, someone she trusted to build the system that protected governments and hospitals alike, was the one erasing its integrity line by line. When the assistant left, Shanon exhaled and scrolled through her inbox. 3 new buyout proposals from competitors appeared overnight. All of them offered the same polite ransom: sell Citadel before it collapses, and we'll take the scandal off your hands. She deleted every message. Then her phone buzzed with a text from security control. Night maintenance reports anomaly evidence, requests follow-up meeting. She blinked, half smiling despite the chaos. Everett Daryl again, the quiet man with 2 steady hands. He arrived 10 minutes later, uniform pressed, eyes steady, no visible strain. Shanon watched him cross the room. "Thank you for coming, Mr. Daryl." He nodded once. "You should know last night wasn't random. The men who attacked you knew the garage layout, the camera blind zones, and your schedule." Her stomach turned cold. "You're certain?" "They moved like operators. They weren't there to steal anything. They were there to erase someone, the kind of efficiency that comes from practice." She waited, expecting him to add speculation or motive. He didn't. He simply observed. That silence was louder than alarm bells. Finally, she said, "Why are you telling me this?" His eyes didn't move from hers. "Because some fights choose you, and the only way to win is to see them coming." Then he stood, gave a nod that ended the conversation, and walked out, returning to the invisibility he wore like armor. When the door closed, Shanon stood still for several breaths. Her instincts whispered what she didn't want to believe. Someone inside Helixion had orchestrated her death. Someone is still sitting at their desk upstairs. The next few hours unfolded like a script already written. The board chair called, his voice smooth as polished steel. "Shanon, after last night's unfortunate incident, perhaps we should reconsider Titansoft's acquisition offer." She stared at the window. "Children's hospitals depend on our firewall, Robert. Selling to Titansoft gives them control over half the government's security grid." "Then you've already made your choice," he said, and hung up. She turned back to her computer, heart hammering. Every corporate war she'd fought before this one felt like rehearsal. But this was personal. Far below, in the maintenance sublevel, Everett Daryl steered his cleaning cart through a corridor of humming servers and blue indicator lights that blinked like distant constellations. He paused by a junction box. The maintenance door had been relocked, but the seal looked off. Replaced. He crouched, gloved hands tracing the edge where fresh metal met old. When he opened it, he found new wiring spliced into Helixion's main optical feed, routing data through a ghost node that didn't exist in the system map. Someone was bleeding information directly out of Citadel's heart. Everett snapped a photo on his work phone and then another with a secondary, encrypted one he hadn't touched in years. His breathing stayed steady, but the air felt heavy, too reminiscent of places where silence had meant ambush. He stood, dusted off his gloves, and resumed pushing the cart. The key to staying invisible wasn't blending in. It was never giving anyone reason to remember you. Behind the locked maintenance door, the servers continued humming their endless lullaby, unaware that the man cleaning their floor had once built networks far more dangerous, and had come here to bury that part of himself. But some ghosts, he knew, never stayed buried. At her desk upstairs, Shanon stared at the city skyline and thought of the janitor who moved like precision-made flesh. Maybe, she realized, the only thing more dangerous than the attack was what he hadn't said yet. The research sublevels of Helixion were a different world. No windows, only the pulse of server fans and the quiet rhythm of machines translating thought into code. Everett guided his cleaning cart down the aisle between server racks, each machine humming like a heartbeat. He'd walked this path 100 times before, but tonight, something felt different. On the display of a diagnostics panel, a row of encryption metrics flickered in a pattern that shouldn't exist. Too even, too deliberate, a signature disguised as noise. He stared for a long moment, then pulled out his maintenance tablet and accessed the environmental logs. Every air control vent in this section had been cycled 3 extra times between midnight and 3 o'clock a.m. A small adjustment no one would notice, except it coincided exactly with the data transfer spikes from the compromised feed. Helixion's network wasn't being broken into. It was being rewritten from the inside. He opened a floor access panel and found the kind of tampering that only came from an insider. Fiber lines split and reconnected. Signal boosters swapped for subtle data extractors. Power regulators rerouted. The work was surgical. Someone inside the building had turned Helixion's security division into an instrument of theft. He photographed everything: wires, ports, the altered serial codes, and stored them in a hidden folder under a maintenance ticket labeled Spillage Cleanup. Footsteps echoed from the far corridor. Everett wiped his hands, slid the access panel back into place, and resumed mopping. His posture returned to ordinary, his expression flat. Through the corner of his eye, he saw Kyle Morgan, head of internal audits, walk past carrying a tablet and a locked case. Kyle didn't glance his way. He never did. Everett followed at a distance, noting each access point Kyle touched. When Kyle entered the restricted subcore lab, Everett watched the biometric scanner flash green without hesitation. No hesitation. That's what bothered him. Kale was too calm for someone standing at the heart of the corporation's most secure facility during an ongoing investigation. When Everett finally returned to his quarters, he uploaded his photos to a drive no one else knew existed, then paused at the image of the wiring splice. His eyes caught a detail. The serial tag belonged to a batch that never left the Department of Defense contract 3 years ago. The same year his own death certificate had been filed. He closed the file, pulse ticking faster. That night, Darlene woke up coughing. Everett rushed to her room, knelt beside her bed, and placed a hand on her back. She smiled through the grogginess. "I'm okay, Dad. Bad dream." He adjusted her blanket, but her words stuck in his chest. In her dreams, he wondered, did she see what he used to be? He sat with her until her breathing settled, then turned off the light and stared into the dim hallway until the shape of the past blurred with the present. By morning, Helixion's rumor mill was spinning out of control. Employees whispered about security breaches, leaked patents, and anonymous buyers offering fortunes for stolen algorithms. On the 32nd floor, Shanon Reyes felt the ground shifting under her empire. She'd always been methodical, the kind of leader who memorized every department head's weakness and turned it into efficiency. But this time, she couldn't map the threat because it didn't come from outside competitors. It was coming from within. She called up the most recent access logs again, looking for what Everett had described: minor inconsistencies, off-pattern entries, badge scans that didn't line up with physical presence. And there it was, Kale Morgan logging into the core network from 2 different terminals 20 minutes apart. One in the basement, one on her office floor. That was impossible. Her pulse picked up. She traced the duplicate credentials and found a trail of overwritten records leading back to an executive access node used by Victor Lang, Helixion's CEO. Victor had always been charming, too smooth, too confident, the kind of man who believed every problem could be fixed with the right payoff. And now, the man in charge of the corporation's entire cybersecurity division was using his influence to bury the truth. Shannon leaned back in her chair, staring at the reflection in the glass. Maybe that's why the attack had felt so calculated. Maybe Victor didn't want her removed from the company. He wanted her gone permanently, the last moral obstacle between him and the global sale of Citadel's source code. Down in the maintenance tunnels, Everett's phone buzzed. A message from an encrypted number that hadn't lit up in 3 years. "You were supposed to stay dead." He didn't respond. He couldn't. Because the moment he did, Darlene's life would be on the line. He pocketed the phone and stared at the reflection in the chrome wall, his own eyes staring back at him, older, sharper, tired. The soldier who'd disappeared in a foreign war had found himself cleaning floors beneath the digital frontier, and now the ghosts he'd left behind had found him again. The rest of the day moved like static, background noise to a mind replaying calculations. Every step he took through Helixion's corridors carried the same thought. Whoever had orchestrated the attack wanted both the project and the silence that followed it. And the only thing standing between them and the end of Citadel was him. As dusk fell over the city, Shanon looked out from her office again, the glow of monitors painting faint lines across her face. Somewhere beneath her feet, the man who'd saved her life was uncovering evidence that could destroy the company, or save it. And for the first time, she understood that the difference between those two outcomes depended entirely on whether Everett Daryl trusted her enough to tell the truth. The storm began quietly. Rain slicked the city, tapping against Helixion's mirrored facade like a warning that no one inside could hear. By nightfall, the streets below blurred under neon reflections, the kind of view that looked peaceful from above but always hid chaos beneath. Everett Daryl stood by the sub-basement freight elevator, eyes on the service corridor camera feed looping its own footage in perfect precision, a glitch hidden inside perfection. He'd set that loop himself an hour ago, knowing what was coming. The encrypted phone on his hip buzzed once. Message, package confirmed, target 4B. His blood went cold. 4B, his apartment, his daughter. He checked the time, 11:37 p.m. The same minute every operation he'd ever run began. The same minute he'd died 3 years ago. He ran the calculations, distance, exits, obstacles, before panic could form words. 30 minutes home, 25 if the roads were clear. But Helixion wasn't done with him yet. Above, alarms blared through the executive floors. Security guards shouted orders through radios, but their signals cut in and out, distorted by interference coming from the company's own network. The sabotage Everett had uncovered had just gone live. He pushed the elevator to sublevel 3, the one connected to Helixion's private data vault. If the attackers were smart, and they were, they'd strike there first, destroying evidence before detonating whatever device had been planted in his home. He could save the data, or save Darlene. Not both. When the elevator doors opened, he saw the first casualty. An engineer collapsed against the wall, eyes wide with chemical burn. The faint scent of ozone and methanol hung in the air. A maintenance accident, someone would call it later. He knew better. Assassination disguised as error. He dropped to his knees checking vitals. Shallow pulse. Still alive. The emergency medical kit hung open nearby, untouched. He snapped gloves onto his hands, adrenaline sharpening his focus into something clinical. Check the airway, stabilize, counter agent. He worked with the same unflinching precision he'd once used in field hospitals overseas, hands that remembered how to save before they learned to fight. "Don't die," he muttered quietly, voice steady even as the chaos above bled into the walls around him. Not tonight. When the woman's breathing evened out, he stood, wiping his hands against his uniform. From the corner of his eye, movement, shadows crossing the lab's glass walls. 3 men, black tactical gear, silenced weapons. They moved like ghosts, his kind of ghosts. He grabbed the emergency radio from the wall and switched frequencies. "Reyes," he said, "they're in the building." Static, then her voice sharp and disbelieving. "Everett, where are you?" "Sublevel 3. They're not here for data anymore." "What do you mean?" "They're here for me." Gunfire shattered the lab's calm, glass exploding outward in a rain of shards. Everett dropped, rolling behind a console. Bullets tore through the servers, screens sparking like lightning. He crawled toward a vent duct, pushing the grate loose just as another volley hit the wall behind him. He slipped inside, pulling the panel closed, heart steady but breath shallow. "Darlene," he whispered to himself, a mantra, a direction, a reason. Through the metal shaft, he could hear the contractors speaking in clipped tones, not English. One word repeated, a name buried deep in his old life. The unit that had erased him. The men who'd been paid to make sure Dr. Everett Daryl never existed again. The duct emptied into a maintenance hallway leading to the loading dock. He crawled out, dust rising around him, and grabbed his cart, the same one he'd used in the parking garage days earlier. The aluminum handle still bore the dent from the fight. It would do. By the time he reached the stairwell, the building had gone dark except for the red glow of emergency lights. The alarm voice crackled overhead. "System integrity compromised. Evacuate immediately." No one would realize until morning that the alarm hadn't come from fire control. It had come from the network itself. Upstairs, Shanon Reyes was watching her office cameras blink off one by one. Each feed collapsed into static, erasing Helixion's billion-dollar illusion of security. She grabbed her secured tablet and opened a direct channel to Everett's encrypted line. "Everett, I'm pulling building schematics. Where are you?" "Heading to the subcore. They want Citadel. You need to get to the backup server in the pediatric wing." "What?" "There's a parallel node. You hid it years ago under R&D budgets. It's still running. How do you know that?" "I built the firewall." The line went silent for 2 seconds too long. When Shanon spoke again, her voice was steady. "You're not a janitor, are you?" "Not tonight." He hung up before she could say more. At 11:52, his phone buzzed again. Video feed. He opened it and froze. Darlene's bedroom filled the screen. She was asleep in her bed, arms curled around a stuffed panda, the nightlight casting gold on her cheek. In the corner of the frame, a small, black box blinked red, armed and counting down. The camera tilted slightly, revealing the gloved hand holding the device. A message followed. "Choose, the child or the code." Everett's throat locked. He turned, sprinting toward the loading bay. His cart hit the wall with a clang as he shoved it aside and ripped open the fuse panel. He overloaded the security grid, plunging the sublevels into complete darkness. In the black, he moved like muscle memory. Step, pivot, strike. The first attacker never saw him. A blow to the neck, a twist of the weapon, a body dropping silently. The second fired blind, muzzle flash painting the hallway red. Everett tackled him, sending both of them crashing through a glass divider. The gun clattered away, and a second later, silence reclaimed the room. He wiped blood from his lip, grabbed the fallen man's radio and spoke into it. "Tell your employer I'm coming home." Then he was gone, out through the service door into the storm. Inside Helixion, Shanon Reyes raced through the dim corridors toward the pediatric subwing, her tablet clutched like a lifeline. Every stairwell she passed was filled with smoke alarms and the metallic scent of burning wires. The company she'd built, the fortress of data and defense, was collapsing around her because of one secret buried in the basement and another living under a different name. When she reached the backup node, she connected to the off-grid terminal Everett had mentioned. The system blinked to life, and what she saw made her knees weak. Every Citadel key, every prototype encryption file mirrored perfectly, safe. Everett had hidden them here years ago, under a different name, in a different life. But the backup came with a trace signal. If she accessed it now, the people hunting him would know exactly where she was. The screen flickered, a message appeared. "He's not coming back unless you finish what he started." She stared at the words, understanding that someone else inside Helixion, someone watching both of them, was trying to decide which of them survived the night. Outside, the rain fell harder. Everett's car engine roared as he tore through the city, sirens and neon blurring past. The streets were slick mirrors reflecting a man caught between two worlds. He called Mrs. Adele once, twice, no answer. Every light turned red. Every second felt like an accusation. Then the phone rang. Shanon. Her voice was calm, almost unnaturally so. "They've traced me to the backup server." "Disconnect." "I can't. If I kill the signal, Citadel dies with it." Then stall them. I'm almost home. How long? 13 minutes. You have 9. He didn't reply, as Helixion burned from within, and Shanon fought to keep its digital heart alive. Everett Daryl drove through the rain toward the only thing that mattered. The war he'd left behind had finally found him again, this time in the shape of a small blinking light beneath his daughter's bed. The rain hadn't stopped. It came down in silver sheets, blurring headlights and streetlights into a single smear of white. Everett's wipers clawed across the windshield as he pushed the car faster, tires skimming puddles that wanted to drag him sideways. The city rushed past, a maze of wet glass and neon. He barely saw it. All he could see was the small blinking red light burned into his mind, the one sitting inches from his daughter's bed. His phone lay on the dashboard, speaker open. Mrs. Adele's voice came through in fragments, breaking between bursts of static. She's breathing funny. Everett, the box, something's ticking. Get her outside, now! I tried. The door won't open. The line went dead. He gripped the steering wheel hard enough for his knuckles to whiten, every nerve alive with calculation. Distance, 4 miles. Time, 9 minutes. He reached into the glove compartment and pulled out a small silver drive, the one with every file he'd collected from Helixion's sub-basement. Evidence, data, proof. The entire network of corruption compressed into one unassuming piece of metal. He looked at it once and threw it out the window. Some truths could wait. By the time he reached the building, the rain had soaked through his uniform. He didn't feel it. The elevator was out. He took the stairs 2 at a time, lungs burning, the echo of his footsteps a drumbeat in the empty hall. Apartment 4B. He hit the door hard enough to crack the frame. The lights were out. The smell of ozone and smoke filled the air. Mrs. Adele sat on the floor near the couch, shaking, phone pressed to her chest. She looked up with wide eyes. She's in her room, won't wake up. Everett was already moving. He reached Darlene's doorway and froze. She was lying on the floor, small body trembling in the strobing glow of the nightlight. Her skin was pale, lips tinged blue. The box beneath the bed blinked faster now, red to orange to white. He dropped to his knees, pulled her into his arms. "Come on, sweetheart," he whispered, fingers brushing her hair back. "Stay with me." He spotted the injector case spilled open beside the nightstand. One of the vials had shattered. The medication she needed, the real one, was gone. The rest of the setup fell into focus. The blinking device wasn't a bomb at all. It was a decoy. The real weapon was inside her. Poison slipped into her last dose hours ago. Everett's training took over. He laid her flat, checked pulse, airway, pupils. Too slow, too shallow. He scanned the case again, mind racing. If it was synthetic toxin, the only counteragent strong enough was the experimental serum from Helixion's pediatric lab. He pulled out his phone. "Shanon." Her voice came through instantly, breathless. "I'm here. Everett, what happened?" "She's seizing. They used her meds. I need that compound you synthesized. Now." "It's not finished." "It doesn't matter. Send it." "I can't transmit it digitally. It's not data, it's chemistry." "Then, tell me the formula." There was a pause long enough for both of them to hear Darlene's breathing hitch. Then Shanon began reciting, slow, deliberate, each ratio and unit precise. Everett scribbled on the back of an old envelope, mind switching to math, converting doses, adjusting for age and weight. "Are you sure about this?" she asked. "No, but it's all I've got." He moved like a machine after that. Kitchen table turned lab bench, water boiled, pills crushed, measurements exact down to half milliliters. His hands didn't shake. They never did when the cost of hesitation was life. He drew the final mixture into the injector and knelt beside his daughter again. "Hey, Dee," he whispered, voice breaking for the first time that night. "You wanted to go to that museum, remember? You still owe me a picture with that T-Rex." He pressed the injector against her arm. The needle hissed. Seconds stretched. Her body jerked once, then twice, and finally the tremors stopped. Her breathing steadied, soft, even. The color began to return to her face. Everett exhaled the breath he'd been holding since the elevator doors closed downstairs. He sat there for a long moment, hand on her chest, counting each rise and fall like a prayer. Then, from the hallway outside, footsteps. Measured. Heavy. Not Mrs. Adele's. He stood, placed Darlene gently on the bed, and stepped back into the living room. The doorframe splintered inward. 3 men in black gear, the same insignia he'd seen years ago on a desert night before he became invisible. Everett reached for the only thing he had left, the aluminum mop handle, still leaning near the sink where he'd left it after his last shift. He held it low, loose, like a fencer with no time for ceremony. The first man stepped forward. "You should have stayed dead, Daryl." Everett didn't answer. The handle flashed once, twice, striking bone and soft tissue in rhythm. The second attacker dropped before his partner hit the floor. The third raised a pistol, but Everett was already inside his reach, twisting his wrist until the gun clattered across the tile. The strike that followed was clean and final. When it was over, the room was quiet except for the faint hum of the refrigerator and the rain still whispering against the windows. He leaned against the counter, breathing slow, heart still steady. Behind him, a small voice. "Dad?" He turned. Darlene stood in the doorway, pale but awake, clutching her stuffed panda. Her eyes found the fallen men, then him. "Are we safe?" He crossed the room and knelt. "Yes, sweetheart, we're safe now." She pressed her face into his shoulder and held on like the world might slip away if she let go. He closed his eyes and for the first time in years let himself feel everything he'd been holding back. By dawn, the police had sealed the street. Federal agents in windbreakers with no names came and went. Shanon Reyes arrived just as they carried out the last of the bodies. Her clothes were soaked, hair undone, but her eyes were sharp. In her hands, she carried a small case. Inside it, a vial of the perfected serum, and a hard drive. She stepped through the doorway quietly, careful not to wake Darlene, who was asleep on the couch under a blanket. Everett looked up from the chair where he sat, exhaustion hanging from his shoulders. "They'll come for you," she said. "They already did. Helixion's board is finished. The evidence you sent before you left, it's enough. The government has everything." He smiled faintly. "I didn't send it." Her brow furrowed. "You will," he said, "when they try to erase me again." She looked at the drive in her hand, then at him. "What about her?" she asked softly. "She's the reason I'm still here." They stood in silence for a moment. 2 survivors of different wars, both too tired to celebrate the victory. Outside, dawn broke across the skyline, washing the rain-slick streets in gold. The city looked almost clean again. Months later, the headlines would tell a different story. Helixion Corporation exposed for cyber espionage and data laundering, CEO arrested in federal sting. But in a small apartment miles from that tower of glass, Darlene Daryl laughed at a science experiment on her school tablet, her father's reflection faint in the screen beside her. She no longer needed nightly doses or whispered reassurances in the dark, just the steady presence of the man who refused to stay dead. Every morning before work, Everett would check the locks twice, pour 2 cups of coffee, one for him, one for Mrs. Adele, and watch the sunlight hit the city he'd nearly lost. Then he'd pick up his mop, the aluminum handle polished and bright again, and head to Helixion's ground floor, where a new security team waited for orders. The world saw a janitor. But those who knew better understood. Sometimes the quietest man in the building is the one keeping it alive. And when Shanon Reyes passed him in the corridor, she always paused for just a second, long enough for their eyes to meet, for gratitude to pass unspoken between them. Because every network, no matter how complex, still depends on one simple truth. Someone has to keep the power running. Someone has to clean the mess. And sometimes, the man with the mop is the only thing standing between the world and its collapse. The rain started again that evening, soft and unthreatening this time. Everett watched from the window as Darlene's laughter echoed from the next room. He smiled to himself, the ghost of a soldier replaced by the quiet heartbeat of a father who had finally won his war. That's it for today. Thanks so much for watching. If you found this helpful, give it a like, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe so you never miss what's coming next. See you in the next one.